The initial shock and loss of breathing control is where the swimmer is at greatest risk of drowning, as it requires very little aspirated water to initiate the drowning process, and so you undergo this positive feedback loop where you get underwater, you get a little bit of water in your lungs, then you gasp for breath more, water's already in your lungs, you pull more water into your lungs, and then you drown.
Have you ever done whole body cryotherapy?
No.
Dude, this is the shit. You gotta try this. This is the latest and greatest thing. Like, I heard about Kobe Bryant using it, but my friend Eddie Bravo, when he was preparing for his match against Hoyler Gracie at Metamoris, he started using it on a daily basis. And Alan Jouban, one of our fighters from 10th Planet, who just fought in the UFC, his knee was hurt, and he did it twice a day, every day before his last UFC fight, and it totally fixed all the inflammation in his knee.
Humans have used cold exposure, often with the expectation that it promotes health, for centuries. But habitual cold exposure can have far-reaching beneficial effects on our bodies, metabolic health, and possibly brain function.
You get so much more energy and so much more peace because the stress will go out of your body.
You say that everyone would benefit from taking a cold shower every day. Why is the cold so powerful?
The cold, without a doubt, very directly, very effectively, very strongly, is able to tackle the biggest health problem in the world, which is the cardiovascular related diseases.
You can go into the cold water and adapt. And with that, you become the alchemist of life itself.
How many times a week do you need to expose yourself to cold will depend on how much fat you're trying to lose and how much you're trying to increase your metabolism. There are studies that describe positive effects on fat loss of exposing yourself to cold either through cold shower or through ice bath or other cold water. It doesn't have to actually have ice in it, provided it's cold enough.
And it's ridiculously good for inflammation, ridiculously good for any aches or pains that you might have, like muscle soreness, because your body freaks the fuck out. It feels this 250 degrees below zero, and it just goes, holy shit.
And look, if you get into water that's very, very cold, it can actually shock your heart. It can actually give you a heart attack if it's truly, truly ice cold and you're not adapted to that.
You cannot just jump in. This is dangerous.
Right over here.
I started to feel like a panic attack coming on.
A human wouldn't last too long, and he would go into involuntary gasping.
Hey everybody, this is Kevin Bass from thedietwars.com. I want to talk to you guys today about a woman who, after learning all of the great hype about cold exposure therapy, how it would help restore her to optimal mental health, produce dramatic benefits for her vascular system and immune systems, after she bought into all of this hype that was advertised on a website in the United Kingdom with no mention whatsoever of any risks, how when she was in the river practicing cold exposure therapy, she died. And I want for this podcast to be a telling of that tale, but also a discussion about the dangers of misinformation on the internet, because misinformation about cold exposure therapy, misinformation killed this woman. Before I do all of that, though, I want to introduce myself, because people tuning in for the first time may not know who I am, and some people who know who I am might want to have a deeper background. I am an MD PhD student, which is to say I'm a medical student pursuing 2 degrees, the medical degree, as well as a PhD, which is a research degree. The medical degree is a professional degree. It makes me, hopefully, if I do it the right way, if I pursue the training in the correct manner and with the due diligence, it will make me into at minimum, a competent doctor. And the PhD is a research degree. It's a scientific degree, which it's a little bit more variable what that training entails, but assuming I have the stuff inside, so to speak, and a lot of it has to do with really what you put into it, but assuming I have the right stuff that I put into it, it should make me, or allow me, enable me to become a competent scientist. So I've done 2 years of the medical degree. It's a 4-year program, and I've done several years, too many years to count, of the PhD degree. And I'm going to be graduating next year with the PhD, and then in 2 years after that, I will finish my medical degree. So during the time that I've been working on the MD and then the PhD, I've been increasingly interested in misinformation, so much so that over the last 4, maybe 5 years, that's been one of my major focuses. Before that, I was mainly interested in the obesity epidemic, and these connected in the following manner. When you start to look up online what different opinions are about how we resolve the obesity epidemic, how we solve the problem, you'll get a wide range of different beliefs and claims about how that should be resolved. And these differences and these claims originate in differences in beliefs about what the original cause is, often. There's so much variety and contradiction in diet and nutrition science as articulated online, on the internet, and even in the popular media, as well as in books, that it follows that most of it has to be false. And indeed, most of it is false, because the more I started to learn, especially during my PhD portion of my dual degree program, and I had time to sit and think and fail in my experiments and have a bunch of free time to think scientifically, as opposed to always pushing the pedal to go 100 miles an hour during my medical training and not think a single bit. I had time to understand that most of the quote-unquote science on which most of the claims that people make about nutrition online and in the popular press, most of that science is grossly misinterpreted and misrepresented, in some cases essentially fabricated in the popular press. And as a result, I came to realize that if we want to actually address the problem of obesity and of these chronic health problems that proliferate, they're related to aging, but they also are getting worse, especially with respect to obesity, we have to come to some sort of consensus about what reality is. If we're constantly arguing about what reality is and never coming to consensus, then we can't actually make policy. We can't make a decision because we're never going to agree. And ideally, in addition to coming to consensus, we should come to consensus on the truth, on what actually is the actual truth. Not on something that's false, but what is true, because if we come to consensus on something that's false, a great example of that might be something like Lysenkoism, then we can reach catastrophic consequences, as happened with Lysenkoism. Lysenkoism was this idea that I can't even remember exactly, but I believe it had something to do with the strength or the robustness or the productiveness of agricultural plants was not genetically inherited, it was cultivated in a sort of Lamarckian fashion, similar to how class consciousness in Soviet Russia could be cultivated, because this is a Soviet idea. And this is consistent with Soviet ideology, it was thought. And so this idea was pushed by the Soviet Party in Russia, and it resulted in catastrophic crop failure and great famine across the country. So whenever you have consensus about a wrong idea, it's also terrible. So what we need is a battle against misinformation, both on the ground and on the legislative level, we need some way, some set of mechanisms to reduce the noise and amplify the signal. And what we have right now, especially in the age of modern social media, where clicks are prioritized because clicks are incentivized, because clicks are the way to get advertising revenue. And in order to get clicks, one must say sensational things. So therefore, misinformation is incentivized because sensationalism is incentivized, and controversy and conflict and all of those other things are incentivized financially. In the age of modern social media, we need this more than ever, some way to take all of that noise and reduce it and amplify the signal. We need, in other words, a system that organically works to increase the productiveness of our public discussions. And I realized this over the course of quite a few years during my PhD as I was battling with misinformation. We need something like that, and that is the first thing that has to happen in order to solve the obesity epidemic, unless it can come from the private sector, which it actually might end up coming from the private sector with the new GLP-1 receptor agonists like semaglutide and others that are also coming out. I've talked about that the other video about this about a month ago. But nonetheless, this is going to be a continuing problem that's going to afflict us whenever we have to make a public policy decision or a public decision that requires consensus among people about what reality is. If we don't deal with the misinformation problem, we're going to come up against some serious freaking trouble. And so, my passion now is to dispel and to illuminate health misinformation. So if I find health misinformation on the interwebs, I want to point out it is health misinformation. And by pointing that out, I can hopefully help other people to realize how ubiquitous the problem is as much as me. And of course, propose solutions to it to people as people understand what the problem is. And hopefully these ideas, these solutions that I'm proposing will become more common as far as people understanding that these are potential solutions. And then we can, as a result, start to come to a consensus about which sorts of solutions we want to employ. And then eventually we can solve the problem through some sort of public policy effort, regulation of social media algorithms, regulation of how misinformation claims are regulated, changes in the law, changes in the scope of what the FTC can declare, health fraud, etc. There's actually a lot of different possibilities. Maybe even regulations on how social media is structured, how the experience is structured, such so as to reduce the echo chambers and the ability to have such great incentives for saying false things, but not many disincentives for doing those things. Of course, the problem is there that we're eventually going to get misinformation about misinformation, which we're already getting to at a great degree, which is also clouding our ability even to deal with the misinformation problem. So that is its own level of complexity and something I'm not going to get into for the purpose of this podcast video. What I will do, though, is I will now switch back to the subject. This was really important to introduce this bit of background, and I'm probably going to keep doing it for the next few podcasts, maybe even indefinitely introducing the same background, because I think people really need to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm pointing out the harms of misinformation. I'm pointing out how ubiquitous misinformation is on the internet, and I'm pointing out that we really need to do something to address it. And that all said, let's now segue to the issue of the woman dying as a result of cold exposure therapy, of misinformation about cold exposure therapy, because otherwise she wouldn't have been there. This woman dying as a result of misinformation about cold exposure therapy in the United Kingdom and what it means for the discussion about misinformation.
Have you ever done whole body cryotherapy?
No.
Dude, this is the shit. You gotta try this. This is the latest and greatest thing. Like, I'd heard about Kobe Bryant using it, but my friend Eddie Bravo, when he was preparing for his match against Royler Gracie at Metamoris, he started using it on a daily basis. And Alan Joban, one of our fighters from 10th Planet, who just fought in the UFC, his knee was hurt, and he did it twice a day, every day before his last UFC fight, and it totally fixed all the inflammation in his knee.
Humans have used cold exposure, often with the expectation that it promotes health, for centuries. But habitual cold exposure can have far-reaching beneficial effects on our bodies, metabolic health, and possibly brain function.
You get so much more energy and so much more peace because the stress will go out of your body.
You say that everyone would benefit from taking a cold shower every day. Why is the cold so powerful?
The cold, without a doubt, very directly, very effectively, very strongly, is able to tackle the biggest health problem in the world, which is the cardiovascular related diseases.
You can go into the cold water and adapt. And with that, you become the alchemist of life itself.
How many times a week do you need to expose yourself to cold will depend on how much fat you're trying to lose and how much you're trying to increase your metabolism. There are studies that describe positive effects on fat loss of exposing yourself to cold either through cold shower or through ice bath or other cold water. It doesn't have to actually have ice in it, provided it's cold enough.
And it's ridiculously good for inflammation, ridiculously good for any aches or pains that you might have, like muscle soreness, because your body freaks the fuck out. It feels this 250 degrees below zero, and it just goes, holy shit.
And look, if you get into water that's very, very cold, it can actually shock your heart. It can actually give you a heart attack if it's truly, truly ice cold and you're not adapted to that.
You cannot just jump in. This is dangerous.
Right over here.
I started to feel like a panic attack coming on.
A human wouldn't last too long, and he would go into involuntary gasping.
So as you see in this article, this woman died in the Derbyshire River. She reportedly immersed herself into the river as part of a cold water therapy session. She died. According to this article, it says that she died on the scene. And apparently she's also the mom of 3. She's the mother of 3 who died on the scene. So we sent a paramedic and fast response car and a double crewed ambulance. The air ambulance is also in attendance. So they sent an air ambulance. I guess it was a helicopter. Says she died at the scene. A file is being prepared for a coroner. She was 39. This dude who did this, he'd helped a bunch of celebrities with cold water therapy, about 1,000 people, and this is the only person who died. Well, again, if you do a treatment enough, if you do an intervention enough that has a significant amount of stress on the body like this one, eventually somebody's going to have a harm. And if it doesn't have a lot of benefit, you should think about that. So again, this is the result of promoting a treatment in mass, and as a result of promoting this treatment in mass that doesn't have much benefit and has a substantial risk of harm, you're going to get more people who have a bad outcome because simply more people are being exposed to the treatment. Okay, let's look at what sorts of benefits are overhyped on the website. This is the website of the guy who promoted this treatment, who then took this woman out and she died in the river. What is the list of benefits that he's saying that exist? So he says the benefits are just too many to list, but here are a few of them. Boosting immune system and immune response. Improving concentration, improving mental well-being, improving willpower, increasing energy levels and activity, relieving stress, improving sleep, improving the vascular system, relieving symptoms of depression and anxiety, basically everything. And then it says the list goes on. And he says these are only just a few of the benefits. So basically the benefits are endless. And then I don't see like our risks. Where's the risks? There's no risks, there's just the benefits, right? There's no risk, there's just benefits, and the benefits are to everything. It helps everything. It helps your mind, helps your body, it helps everything. And they're huge and they're incredible. Yeah, the benefits are incredible. So it's literally, it says the benefits are incredible. Like, what's the evidence that the benefits are incredible? What's the evidence? So as a result of this website promoting these claims that these incredible benefits to this cold water immersion without any evidence whatsoever, this woman goes out, does cold water immersion, she dies. Why did she die? So there's this review about cold water immersion. This doesn't cover everything, actually. This covers only a few things. We're going to go on to another website to cover everything. But basically, it says when cold water swimming is practiced by experienced people, there's health benefits. However, there's a risk of death in unfamiliar people, either due to initial neurogenic shock response or due to a progressive decrease in swimming efficiency or hypothermia rather. And this article is called Cold Water Swimming, Benefits and Risks, a Narrative Review. All right. So let's actually go to the risks part. Health risks of cold water and ice swimming. Even if cold water swimming can provide a benefit in certain cases, the risks, especially with ice swimming, should not be disregarded. And of course, as you should mention, this is about swimming. This isn't necessarily just about sitting in the immersion, but similar sorts of effects, at least in some respects, can be attributed to immersion as well. There's some overlap between the two. So it says, when swimming, it is important to be aware of potential cardiac and pulmonary risks that arise due to cold exposure. It is important to note that the thermoneutral temperature of humans is approximately 37 degrees Celsius, about 98 degrees Fahrenheit or 97 degrees Fahrenheit, and that prolonged immersion in water colder than 35 degrees Celsius may produce hypothermia as the body heat is lost to the environment. And then here's the next paragraph. Cold water and ice swimming require preparation, acclimatization, and more importantly, cold water immersion experience and should be undertaken only with appropriate supervision in order to avoid injury or death. So there's like an injury or death problem here. Even in the most experienced ice swimmers, cold water immersion carries risk of death. Initial shock and loss of breathing control is where the swimmer is at greatest risk of drowning, as it requires very little aspirated water to initiate the drowning process, and so you undergo this positive feedback loop where you get underwater, you get a little bit of water in your lungs, then you gasp for breath more, water's already in your lungs, you pull more water into your lungs, and then you drown. So far, 2 deaths have been reported in an official ice swimming competition. In December 2018, a native and very experienced ice swimmer died in Russia after his race over 50 meters dolphin. I don't know what dolphin is. Is that a fly? Is that like the butterfly stroke? What is that exactly? I'm not sure what that is, but he says on the way to the warm-up area, he collapsed unexpectedly and died on the spot. The water was 0 degrees cold and the air was negative 20 degrees Celsius. At the end of December 2019, a 51-year-old swimmer died after an official competition in Shuangshan in China. The swimmer passed medical examination prior to the start without problems, but felt uncomfortable during the 50-meter long ice swim and was taken out of the water and transferred to the hospital where he died afterwards. Okay, so apparently you can get pulmonary edema, like you can get actually, you can get cough, shortness of breath, foam, and hemoptysis. Swimming-induced pulmonary edema. Well, in any case, so there's a bunch of things that are bad that can happen. If you're in cold water, you have these cold water immersions, often during the swimming process itself, but there's a substantial amount of overlap with just immersion in cold water. And actually, this is just a really popular website at weather.gov where they talk in more detail about some of this stuff. So again, they do this cold shock phenomenon where they talk about when you immediately get in, you can have involuntary gasping, rapid breathing, or hyperventilating due to the shock of sudden immersion. And then you have heart and blood pressure problems. So cold water can cause a sudden spike in heart rate and blood pressure. This increase can cause heart failure and stroke. So because you're getting this increase in blood pressure, because your body's trying to compensate, and because you're going to increase in heart rate, this can precipitate a stroke. So you're stressing the vascular system, and then you cause a stroke. And as we can see here in this case of this woman who died, she had medical clearance. She was cleared, no health problems, but she had a stroke anyway. Why? Well, you can't always know whether somebody's going to have a stroke or not whenever they're subjected to cardiac stress. You can't always know. So that's not to say you shouldn't do cold water immersion, but look, if you're going and you're seeing this list of benefits, boosting immune response and system, improving concentration, improving mental well-being, increasing willpower, increasing energy levels, focus, relieving stress, improving sleep, improving the vascular system, relieving symptoms of depression and anxiety, and everything in the world is a benefit here. You're going to benefit in these incredible ways according to this website. Well, yeah, like what's the tiny risk of death in like proportion to that? But what if these benefits are bullshit, right? What if cold water immersion doesn't have these benefits and these benefits are just cherry picked? What if there's no really good studies showing that you have these long-lasting benefits of cold water immersion that happen compared to other safer modalities better? What if you're just doing something you think is going to be beneficial, but it's not that beneficial and it carries risks with it? And you're misled about the benefits. What do you do then? Is that a fair thing to be communicating that to people? How you can have all these amazing benefits from cold water therapy with this tiny freak risk of dying. If you actually don't have those benefits, how is that fair? In a certain way, as I've mentioned, this kind of misinformation caused this woman's death. This misinformation about cold water therapy caused her to die because she was misled about the relative balance of risks and benefits. The benefits are not what it's saying here. Yes, there's some marginal benefits, especially to mental well-being, et cetera, et cetera. I don't even know if it's clear if those benefits are maintained in the long run. I don't even think that there's rigorous studies demonstrating that clearly. But there's probably some mental benefits. There's probably no vascular benefits, and some of these mental benefits are probably vastly overstated. And certainly there's no evidence to support them to the degree that this website is saying that they are good. But in the name of marketing, naming these overwhelming benefits to people gets people to do your intervention, even if they know there's a small risk. If she'd known that the benefits weren't as great as this website is saying that they are, would she have ever done this? Would she have ever chosen to participate in this activity? Would she have ever undergone this risk that could have led to her death? Or would she have stayed home and tried something else that had better evidence for it? And this is the danger of misinformation. Not only does it distract us from doing things that might be more beneficial, it can lead to us dying because we're being misled. We think we're going to get a great benefit, but there's actually a risk. And it ends up being that there's only really risks, and the benefits aren't nearly as great as what we're being told. Overhyping and misinformation kills people. And so in this article, we find out she was actually a mother of 3. She's a 39-year-old woman, a mother of 3. In over 66.5 million views of hashtag cold water therapy on TikTok now, right? So people are just randomly going out. So one of the things that some of the advocates and personalities recommending these interventions online, like Huberman, who's got the number 8 podcast in the world, in the United States. What many of these people are saying is, okay, if you look at these controlled environments, in the controlled environments of these scientific studies, we see that, very few of the subjects had these terrible adverse reactions. It's not a problem, et cetera, et cetera. It's a safe practice. Okay, maybe. But what about when you take people who are amateurs, right? Who are not well trained, who are not health professionals, right? Or people who just saw a TikTok video. A 15-year-old sees a TikTok video, and you have them go try those things. Are they going to be trying it in the same safe way as it was done in this perfectly controlled study? No. So it's not how safe it was in the study. It's like, how safe is it going to be in the real world? It's not even how efficacious it's going to be in the study. How efficacious is it going to be in the real world? Because it'll also be less efficacious in the real world as well, and probably more dangerous for exactly the reason I'm pointing out. So when you're getting 66.5 million views of cold water therapy on TikTok, and people are going into cold rivers and doing this stuff, I was about to speak French. You're going to have a lot more people doing dangerous stuff, potentially for no benefit at all. Just because people can misrepresent studies online and provide misinformation that's then going to cause people to do dumb shit. Don't do dumb stuff. So yeah, it's she underwent, again, she signed a waiver form, she underwent this medical evaluation, but she still had a problem. Maybe she had a stroke. Maybe she collapsed under the water and drowned. Nobody really knows. It's like the full details are not there yet. I'm not sure if there's a more recent article. Let's see if there's a more recent article. Yeah, there's not a more recent article, but then this is the cost of misinformation. This is the price of misinformation. People dying. Let's see if I can't find anything. I'm trying to find something more recent. Yeah, I can't find anything else. So, all right, well, so people need to think twice about, first off, supporting this kind of stuff. Like, if somebody's like telling you these wild claims about, oh, this is gonna cure your life, cure all your problems, it's gonna treat all your problems, you need to be super skeptical. Everybody needs to be super skeptical about that kind of stuff, because most of the time that's not true. And if it's not done in a randomized controlled trial in a controlled fashion where they demonstrate these benefits on actual real outcomes, hard outcomes, like are they getting a heart attack, are people having a lower rate of depression, or are they having a lower relapse of their depression, are they having less depression in like a 2-week randomized controlled trial? That's not a test. Are they actually, like, in the long term having better outcomes? Are they having a lower risk of death? Are they having greater weight loss in the long term? Unless you have those kinds of studies, look, man, most of that stuff is not going to turn out to be true. That's been shown very clearly by the randomized controlled trial literature. That's been shown very clearly by investigations of this topic. Most of the studies that get done to look for FDA approval on different drugs, most of those studies don't actually end up yielding a positive result. That is to say, benefits that exceed the risk of harms in an acceptable manner. They don't actually treat the disease to the degree that it's beneficial enough for the harms for the benefits to exceed the harms. And as a result, they don't get approved. About 85% of treatments that are trials that are done for FDA approval don't actually end up getting their drug approved. 85% of the drugs, 85% of the interventions. So you have this really interesting preclinical data or clinical data where you see like these small effects, these interesting effects biologically, physiologically, etc. It may not actually yield anything in a rigorous long-term study. Maybe the result of some sort of distortion in the clinical trial. So maybe there's so many different ways that the clinical trials can misrepresent what reality actually is, but there's study design flaws. There's the fact that it's only a short-term study. There's adherence issues. There's blinding issues. There's sample size issues. There's random effects that happen that sometimes yield statistically significant effects that aren't actually real. There's research fraud, right? So just because something happens in like a short-term, poorly done study that's not actually a randomized controlled trial looking at long-term hard outcomes doesn't mean it's actually going to produce a health benefit. And most of the time, treatments that, and I'll do a whole nother podcast after this on this subject. I have a blog post on this subject. I'll redo it and I'll put it in a podcast form right up following this video. So immediately after I publish this podcast, I'm going to publish another one on the same topic on actually this particular problem of most hype doesn't actually survive randomized controlled trials. And this is one of the cases where this is hype that for most of the benefits that are claimed to be from this so-called cold water therapy, most of these benefits are not rigorously tested. Most of these benefits will not pan out. And yet this woman died as a result of benefits that are never going to pan out in a randomized controlled trial. They'll never pan out. And yet she died because of it. So it's something to think about. If you're a health influencer watching this, it's something to think about. You can make money. Do you want people to die? Do you want people to be hurt by this thing that you're promoting that has risks and may not be producing the benefits that you're claiming for it? Is that what you want? And for the audience, the general audience, look, be skeptical. Unless it's been done in a randomized controlled trial, be really skeptical. And again, we're going to cover that in I guess a kind of a part two to this, part one. It's going to be immediately after. So if you download this episode, the episode that's either right before or right after, it might end up being right before because the way that the uploads work. It's going to be right before or right after. I'll be talking about the problem with randomized controlled trials and or the lack thereof and concluding based on the lack of rigorous randomized controlled trials that something actually works, why that's a huge problem. And in this case, it caused this woman's death. So if you like this video or you like my videos in general, please check me out on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram at Kevin N. Bass, KevinnBass. Check me out on YouTube at KBass Philadelphia. Also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts at The Kevin Bass Show. You can also check me out at Patreon at Kevin N. Bass, KevinnBass. Please, become a patron if you like what I'm doing. If you want to ask more questions. There's some of you guys who ask a question every video, every tweet, every post I make. If you aren't a patron, you're asking questions every single one. I'm trying to answer all of your questions, but chip in if that's what you're doing and that's what you're going to keep doing. Also, I have phone consultations for you guys if you guys want those. It's not anything special. It's just I'm going to I'll talk about the scientific literature with you. So if you want to learn more about the scientific literature says and how it might or might not apply to your particular situation and how to think about it, if you're a critical thinker and somebody who thinks deep about what the science actually says, and you should, because that's what scientists do, and that's the way especially overhyped claims should be thought about, because they need all the critical thinking that you can throw at them. Please become a patron or send me a message, and then we can set up some phone consultations if some people do that. So some people are I'm now working with them on that. And then leave a review if you want. Mainly, it doesn't even help the rankings at all. If you leave a review, honestly, it doesn't help the rankings at all. Actually, I've looked into this. But it will give me important feedback, either positive or negative. I love whenever you provide positive feedback, of course, but negative is also good if it's well-meaning. And if it's not well-meaning, whatever, dude. Like, you can provide all that stuff that you want. But if it's well-meaning, that's also very helpful. What else? So, and then share, comment, ask questions in the comment section on YouTube, and share this thing. Circulate this around. And I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, do all that good stuff. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.
It can actually shock your heart. It can actually give you a heart attack if it's truly, truly ice cold.
And he would go into involuntary gasping.